All right, so now we're going to go on to our second topic, which is student organization funding, also called, referred to a lot this evening, SOF. Feel free to use the acronym, save some breath.
In a little bit of time.
Okay, we're going to be starting with you guys. First question. The MUSG budget, counting the reserve fund, sits at a little over $250,000. Is enough being done to make this money more accessible to student organizations? Why or why not?
Not sure. We said over $250,000. The MUSG budget itself is about $500,000, and then the reserve fund itself sits at $250,000. Just to clarify the numbers there. I'm not sure if enough is being done with regards to making sure that SOF is made available to student organizations. That's something that we're working on right now. Sam and I campaigned on reforming SOF last year, and Sam fulfilled that campaign promise whenever he appointed me to chair a new committee last November that is reviewing the SOF process. I've sat down with three financial vice presidents, myself, Alex Lahr, our communication vice president, as well as a number of senators who have sat in on the SOF process. We're talking about ways to simplify the application, clarify the guidelines, make sure that student organizations know what is expected of them when they come to MUSG for funding. I think that it's not as clear as we'd like it to be, and that's why we're working on it right now very diligently.
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree. SOF is a confusing process. I've gone through and attempted to fill out a form myself, and that is something that really needs to be simplified and needs to, also organizations need to have access and knowledge that they even have this opportunity to have funding. And so that should be a priority, is to ensure that organizations who want to bring speakers to campus, who want to go on retreats, who want to go to conventions or whatnot, have those resources in order to make their organization successful. And at the end of the day, it's to make the success and health of our organizations on campus.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so definitely we've seen campaigns so far, the frustration that organizations have had with funding. The number one way for MUSG is to support organizations with through funding. And we definitely like that there needs to be an internal review with the ad hoc committee, and we want to continue that. We think it should be definitely a year-to-year basis, as well as working externally. Kyle and I, our idea is to actually work with the College of Business so they can kind of audit their student government and have a fresh look on it. Because we feel like right now we have a lot of eyes who've been looking at this for a long time, and it's time for someone else to really look at it to make sure it's simplified. I know for myself, on day one, if elected, I want to contact all of the organizations who apply for funding, whether or not they were allocated the money or denied, and actually sit down with them and go through the process and just say, what can we do to make this more simplified? What questions do you have? Because we want to support our organizations. We don't want them to feel like we have this money just sitting there and we kind of like dangling it in their face. We want to make sure that they can get all the money that they deserve. Excuse me.
I'd just like to stress that Natalie and I feel that the SOF ad hoc review is the first step to dealing with this problem, and I think it was the right step. But anytime you work in the private or nonprofit sector, if there's a problem, there's an internal review, and then you bring in eyes from the sector that have never dealt with your processes before to look at it, and if we can't defend it, it's time to change it.
Thank you.
Just to clarify, was your original question about SOF or the reserve fund?
It was about the overall total operating budget.
Okay. So Rosie and I think that there's definitely a lot of room for improvement, making those funds more accessible to students. Right now, as my job for program vice president, I'm tasked with a lot of the responsibilities of giving back that money to students through the different programs that we do. But there's a lot more to be done through the actual SOF procedure. Like Kyle and Natalie just said, the first step for those changes that need to happen are in the SOF review committee. They're continually bringing new ideas, and so we are super excited to see what those changes are, but know that it can't stop there. And so whether it's going to student orgs directly and talking to them about things after the changes, how they feel about it, or if it's talking to students and what do you want to see in our reserve fund, how can we spend that down for you, we're going to be open to both of those.
Great. I completely, I agree with that, and I respect everything that has been done with the ad hoc committee. I definitely see it being taken a step further, and that's in regards to student involvement on the committee. Not only that, but Tyler and myself, we've talked about, the process overall, and how clear it is for students and how much they know about the process of applying to get funding. And so we look forward to sitting down and having interviews established and making sure that it's not only an application that's submitted by paper, but also an application that's face-to-face. So understanding the needs, making sure that they're able to bring across what they actually need the funding for. They put a lot of time and effort into their organizations, and we can only try and give that time and effort back.
And we feel that will reduce the amount of appeals that come through the budget committee.
By having those interviews?
Correct.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Now, we'll start down here at the end. Another question regarding SOF. This past Thursday, the Senate passed a motion to override current President Sam Schultz's veto regarding the reserve fund cap. With the current amount of the account, as stated, around 50% of the MUSG's total current operating budget, do you support the Senate's decision to go through with overriding this veto? And if so, how do you plan to make use of that money?
Yeah, I do support the override of the veto. I think that it was well thought out, well-planned legislation. And so the reserve fund cap, the way that that works is that if ever the reserve fund should hit 50% of the overall MUSG operating budget, a cap is implemented, and any funds that go over that specific dollar amount are moved into an account. And at the beginning of the year, the budget committee comes together and considers applications from any qualifying student service. That includes MUSG itself, any recognized student organization, and departments around campus. So, and this is taken directly from the process that's already in place to handle the unanticipated student activity fee revenue that comes in earlier in the year. So this isn't anything that is new to the budget committee. The way that's going to be best utilized is outreach. It's making sure that students know that they have the opportunity to apply for this and that the budget committee can make these decisions, send it to the Senate, and have them allocate those funds. But what's more important is that we keep the reserve fund from ever hitting that cap and invest that money wisely. It's the first step in a series of measures that deals with this problem, but it's a one down the road. We need to start actively addressing it before we even think about where that gets to.
I have to agree with everything that Colin said. Definitely, we want to make sure that organizations know that what this new process looks like and how they can use the money and how they can support them overall. Like I said before, having that conversation with them on a monthly basis, sitting down with them, and then also continuing the conversation within the Senate and within the industry as well.
Great. Thank you. Charlie Rosen.
Well, we agree with Kyle and Natalie. We both support the override of the veto. We think that it's a really great way for MUSG to provide some responsibility with its finances. And like they both said, we hope that it never hits that 50% of the operating budget. And one way that we are going to help lower that reserve fund is through taking a look at our student support offices on campus. So some of the last times the reserve fund was used to conduct some surveys, whether it be recreational space or just overall space on campus. So we want to help fund some different studies on the Advising Center, on the Career Services Center, as well as the Study Abroad office, and make sure that those are performing up to national standards. And so using the reserve fund to help look at our campus as a whole, find those student needs, because I think that students interact with those on almost a daily basis, and using the students to really help push down that reserve fund. Hopefully we never have to deal with that 50% cap.
Right. I think the important thing is also, like I had said before, is just making sure that it never is an issue by ensuring that students actually understand the process and that it's a clear process. We want to push for clarity and transparency within SOF as well as the overall MUSG experience. And I think that that's something important, and that's something that I look forward to working with.
Thank you.
So now I do not currently serve on the Senate, and the bill is, so therefore I didn't vote on it. But from my understanding is that the money allocated from the 50% cap goes to allocations from the budget committee, and which is SOF is primarily responsible for allocating money. So I believe that it causes a bit of confusion and adds an additional step and more red tape in order to allocate money directly to the students. Yeah, so that is what, I'm not very well versed.
It's okay. I think, Sam and I obviously spoke a little bit about this bill before he vetoed it, and I support Sam's decision to veto it and oppose the Senate overriding that veto. I've had some conversations with the authors after overriding, and we definitely support the ends that they were trying to reach with dealing with the reserve fund and as well as getting money back to student organizations instead of letting it just sit there. However, I don't support the means that that's being done in. I believe it creates sort of this shadow SOF process by giving money to the budget committee to allocate to student organizations, which primarily this money will ultimately go to student organizations. You know, it's been suggested that it might, but it's going to. It might not, but it's going to end up going there. I believe SOF is for student organizations, the budget committee is for the budget. And that's why money should go to SOF. It should not be allocated back to the budget committee.
Thank you.